Good evening, members of the board. My name is Jason Cowam, and I'll be speaking with you about the 2025 General Reassessment that we just wrapped up here in the county. So I figured we'd cover some of the basics first. Purpose for General Reassessment in general, of course, is to ensure the equitable distribution of the tax burden. And that's an important point because over time, as we'll see further along in the presentation, properties go up and down, increase and decrease at differing rates. So it's important to come back and reset them all to the appropriate assessment level so that everyone's treated fairly. And of course, the second reason is to comply with Virginia state reassessment laws, which mandate that counties periodically do this process. So four of the main functions that assessors do across the country, they discover property, they list property once it's been discovered, they value property, and ultimately with the governing body, tax property. So I have a little diagram here. Discovering property is on the bottom of this little diagram. It's the most important and most time-consuming part. And literally the rest of the process is built upon it. So you can't really list property unless you've discovered it. You can't value it unless it's been discovered and listed, and ultimately you can't tax it. So discovery answers questions like, what is the property? How big is it? What is it like? Usually entails a combination of land records like deeds, wills, that kind of stuff, and field observations. So the Commissioner of Revenue has dedicated staff who have maintained acreage sizes, zoning records, ownership for many decades. And then also the county uses a GIS vendor to maintain what's called a shape file so that you can render the approximate shape of each parcel, which does impact value, of course. And then a reassessment team comes along and makes field observations to discover facts like the condition of the property, quality, building size, that kind of stuff. So listing the property is basically, once we've discovered it, we put it into a uniform systematic approach into a computer system that both we ourselves can use it, the information we've collected, and we also have a duty to pass it forward in time to the next generation of people who will come after us. So, we inherited a set of facts about the county. We come in and edit those facts, and then we pass it forward to the next group of people who come after us. It's a very important job. And the next phase is valuing the property. Our goal is to develop a methodology that uniformly distributes a tax burden in a way that approximates market value. And that's a very pointed word, approximates. It's based upon valuing groups of property with a large number of sales. And of course, the goal is to meet state standards and assessment guidelines. This slide is a little bit hard to see, but it comes directly from the State Appraisal Board website, the frequently asked questions page. And question 2 there goes to sort of define a couple terms: sales prices, appraisals, and assessments. And the key point or takeaway here is that an assessment is a mass appraisal of property as of January 1st of each year for tax purposes. And then it goes on to state, assessments are based on large numbers of sales that are analyzed to determine the values for large groups of similar properties. So you can compare that to an appraisal, like for a bank or a refinance, where a lot of research is done on a relatively few number of sales to value one property. So it's sort of like two different scopes of work. You're doing the same mechanics, but the process is similar but different, and often the results are similar but also different. So the major accomplishments of the reassessment, we successfully converted to a new computer system. We overcame some legacy data and migration challenges. So for example, there was a small number of properties where there was not a record of when the building was actually built. So we had to estimate those in order to make it work into the new computer system. Ultimately, we achieved a lot of our statistical goals as far as overall assessment level, COD and PRD. Those are just basic summary statistics that I'll talk about a little bit later. We would have preferred to finish earlier in the year, but because the The new computer system wasn't delivered till late in the year. We had to, extend it, but we did complete it within the extended timeline. So how do we evaluate a reassessment? As we said previously, reassessments are based upon sales. Sales are analyzed in bulk. The more you have, the better off you are. Some sales are qualified, some are thrown out because they don't represent market value. So like a deed of gift, or you're selling it to a relative, or a partial interest, that kind of stuff. Foreclosure sale. And then once the qualified sales are there, we trim them, like for outliers, ones that are super low or super high. And then we group the sales by variables such as size of home, acreage, age of home, location, quality of home, et cetera. And then ultimately we compare and adjust the revised assessments against all those variables and more, and we keep adjusting them until the results are all acceptable. So here's a little highlight of all the sales that occurred in 2024. And as you'll see as we go along, we considered a lot of sales over many years, but we put the most weight on the most recent sales. Makes sense. It's more reflective of the current market. So of the sales that occurred in 2024, we believe we achieved an assessment level of 98.1. That's where we compare the new assessment to the sales price. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's not 100%, right? But it actually is 100% when you consider what's called the upper and lower bound of the confidence interval. So it's kind of like a standard deviation, but the math is a little bit different because it's based on the median instead of an average. So if you take the 90% confidence interval, the 98% nominal assessment level would reach up, and it would actually be 100%. So it could be sort of like a range. 98 is the nominal, could be as high as like 100 or as low as like 96. And the COD turned out to be 15. So for a county like Caroline, where it's not super homogeneous, there's a lot of variation, rural properties, properties in town, commercial properties, lakefront properties, riverfront properties. Anything less than 20 is good. Closer to 5 is like where you cheated. If you get 5 or close to that, you did something called sales chasing, where you just change the sales and not the rest of the values. So that was pretty good. The PRD, let me back up. The COD is a measure of like horizontal equity. So as you go across the county and you compare, houses that are small in town to properties that are big on 100 acres, it says how good are the assessments in the broad universe horizontally. In the PRD, that is basically the vertical equity standard that we do. So that's sort of like, how are the assessments on low value properties, medium value properties, and high value properties? And the range should be between 98, 103. We're right there at it. So it's sort of a natural bias against high value properties because there aren't as many of them in the county, and therefore there's also not as many of them that have sold. So anyway, the results generally align with the state standards.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
You said a term value biased against.
Yes, sir.
And does against mean higher or lower value?
Well, there's a natural bias against anything that's uncommon. So the most commonly occurring type of property in Caroline is small acreage, like 5 acres and less, about 1,400 square feet. That's the most commonly occurring property. So if you have anything in the super small or super big extreme, because there's less of them, period, there's also less of them that have sold. And if there's less of them that are sold, there's less information for us to value them. So there's natural bias against anything that's common.
But going back to my question, you say natural biased against, does that mean they have a higher or a lower value assigned?
Lower.
Lower. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh yeah, sorry. Very similar slide, but this is one for it's just limited to residential sales that occurred in 2024. You can see we achieved basically the same assessment level of 98 with a lower COD because we're just working on houses. The other two numbers are basically the same.